The morning she arrived, I was already in the ward. This is not a thing I do every day. Kings are not supposed to haunt their own sick rooms, I have been told, as though governance were something that happened separately from the people one governed. But a summer fever had taken hold of the river quarter and crawled uphill to the keep over the course of a week, and I had found, in the 20 years since my wolf went patient rather than dormant, that I did better in the presence of things I could actually help. The ward gave me something to do with my hands. The steward had long since stopped mentioning it. She arrived at the east gate at first light with a mule and 2 panniers, and a letter of introduction from the town physician at Belwick's Ford, who was himself down with the fever and not able to make the journey. Her name was Senna Holt. She was a traveling healer, mid-40s, with a practical face and the kind of stillness that comes not from calm, but from having been in enough sick rooms to know that panic is the one thing that costs more than it buys. She handed the letter to the gate ward, accepted a cup of water, and asked to be shown to the patients. The gate ward showed me instead. I happened to be coming through. "You're the king," she said, without particular ceremony. "I am," I said. "Then you can show me yourself, that's faster." I showed her myself. It was, in fact, faster. She worked through the ward that first morning with the concentrated efficiency of someone who had been doing this for a long time and had no interest in impressing anyone with how she did it. Fever breaks, hydration, the particular pressure point at the base of the skull that she said helped with the head pain. She moved from bed to bed and I followed her, partly because she occasionally asked me for things, another blanket, a window opened, a patient's name, and partly because my wolf had done something I had not felt in a long time. Not a surge, not a howl. Something quieter. It had turned over, the way a sleeping dog turns when it registers a familiar footfall and decides, not yet quite conscious, that this is not a thing to worry about. I did not mention this to anyone. She was a stranger and a healer, and there was fever in my keep, and there were more useful things to attend to than whatever my wolf thought about a woman with a mule and a letter from Belwick's Ford. The fever had come in from the river quarter and touched everyone without much attention to rank. On the second morning I walked her through the patient list, and she noted down names in a small folio she kept in her left-hand pocket, the kind of folio that has been used so long the leather has gone soft and dark along the spine. She wrote in a fine, compressed hand. I had the impression she had been keeping records for a long time. "You do this often?" I asked. "Travel to keeps?" "Wherever the fever goes," she said. "Fever doesn't distinguish between a keep and a market town." "No," I said. "It doesn't." She looked at me briefly, with the direct attention she gave all her patients, not rude, simply thorough. "You're not sick," she said. "No." "Then you're here because you find it useful." A pause while she noted something in the folio. "That's sensible." I was not accustomed to being told I was sensible by traveling healers. I found that I did not mind it. On the third morning, she examined 3 men in sequence. The first was a river miller named Oras, from the South Ward, who had come up to the keep with the fever 4 days prior. He was a big man, well into his 40s, with strong hands and a quiet manner, and a habit of looking slightly to the left of whoever he was speaking to, which I had always attributed to some old injury. The second was the stable overseer, a man named Davin who had run my horse yards for 11 years and whom I trusted completely, and who had never given me cause to think of him as anything other than what he was. A good, steady man who understood horses and kept his own counsel. The third was a keep scribe named Aldrin who had been in the fever ward for 2 days and was just beginning to come down. Senna examined each of them with the same careful attention she gave everyone. Pulse at the throat, temperature at the forehead. The eyes, she always looked at the eyes, checking for the particular redness that meant the fever was settling behind them. She was between Davin and Aldrin when she stopped. She looked at Aldrin. She looked across the ward to where Oras was sitting up in his bed. She looked at me. "Why do all three of them have your eyes?" she asked. The ward went still. Not immediately. The stillness took a moment to settle, the way a pond takes a moment to settle after a stone has been dropped in. But it settled. The two attendants at the far end of the ward found reasons to look at the floor. The keep steward, who had come in to check a supply list, went very carefully still in the doorway. Auras, Davin, and Aldrin all looked at her, and then slowly at each other, and then at me. My wolf turned over again. This time it did not go back to sleep. Pale gray eyes, the particular shade that my mother had called storm water, not blue, not green, not a true gray, but the color that happens between them when the light is low. I have looked at my own face in a mirror often enough to know exactly what shade it is. I had been looking at auras for 11 years across this ward, and that table and that market square, and I had never asked. "They are patients of mine," I said, which was not an answer. "I should check the supply list with the steward." Senna Holt looked at me with the same direct attention she gave her patients. "Of course," she said, and went back to Aldrin. I did not sleep well that third night. My wolf was patient. I have said that, and it remains true. The patience that had replaced the old grief was not pretense. But patience is not absence, and whatever Senna Holt had set in motion with her question had given it something to be patient about in a direction I had not anticipated. I lay in the dark and I thought about 3 pairs of eyes the color of storm water, and a question so simple I could not understand why it had taken 20 years for anyone to ask it. Marin, my Luna. 22 years ago she had come to me as the daughter of a boarder house, with dark hair and a steady temperament and the kind of practical grace that had reminded me from the first meeting of someone who had thought carefully about what she wanted and decided to want it without much drama. We had been mated 6 months. She had seemed well. And then she had gone quickly in the night. The messenger had come before dawn. "A fever," he said, "very fast. I am sorry, my lord." I had not questioned it. I had been 29 years old, and I had not yet learned to question the things that came to me as fact from people I trusted. I had mourned. I had governed. The wolf had gone patient in the way that wolves go patient when the thing they were waiting for does not arrive, not giving up exactly, but turning its attention inward, keeping its own company. I had had 22 years of that. I had made a kind of peace with it. And now a traveling healer had looked at 3 men in my fever ward, and asked a question so plain that the walls of the room were still ringing with it. In the morning, I went to find her. She was in the courtyard, checking her panniers. "Senna Holt," I said. She looked up. "My lord." "The question you asked yesterday." "In the ward?" Yes, she did not apologize for it. I had noticed that she did not apologize for things. "I need to understand what you know," I said, "and I need you to understand that this conversation is between us." She studied me for a moment. Then she said, "I tended a woman named Marin Vale for the last 4 years of her life. She died 10 years ago in a village called Ashfeld, 30 miles east of here. She left a field record. I have it." The name hit me the way cold water hits, not a sharp blow but a sudden, total submersion. Marin Vale. She had taken a village name, not a keep name. She had been 30 miles away. She had been alive for 12 years after I was told she was dead. She had been alive and 30 miles east, and I had not. "Show me," I said. She gave me the folio in the small room off the ward that the steward used for supply counts. It was not Marin's original folio. Senna had copied it carefully in her own compressed hand, because the original had begun to deteriorate in the Ashfeld damp. She had kept the copy for 10 years. She had intended, she said, to find a way to deliver it. She had not been certain who to trust. "Why do you have it?" I asked. "She asked me to keep it," Senna said. "She said, when it is safe this should reach him. She described you, she said, you will know him by his eyes." I sat with the folio for a long time that morning. Senna Holt left me to it. I heard her go back to her patients. I heard her voice at intervals through the wall, asking for something, instructing an attendant, saying a patient's name with the particular emphasis she used when she wanted to be certain she had been understood. I read what Marin had written. She had not died of a fever. The fever had been real, she had been genuinely ill, she wrote, and had used that illness, in the brief window it gave her, to disappear. The messenger who brought me the news had been paid to bring that news and no other. The council member who arranged it, a man named Harville, who had died of his own accord 8 years after, old and unrepentant, had believed that Marin carried a bloodline that would produce heirs who would threaten a particular balance of power that Harville had spent 30 years constructing. He was not wrong. She had been carrying children. 3 of them. She had not known at the time of her disappearance that there were 3. She had known there were at least 2. She had arranged, with the help of 2 women she trusted in the border villages, to deliver them separately over the following months and place them with families who had no connection to the keep. A river miller's family in the South Ward, a stable keeper's family in the Eastern Quarter, a scribe's family from the keep's own records house, who had moved to a village and then, years later, moved back. She had watched them where she could. She had kept records of their health, their work, their lives, entries in her folio, careful and compressed, the same hand Senna Holt had copied faithfully for 10 years. She had not told them. She had not told me. She had believed correctly that telling either of us would have put us in danger while Harville lived. After Harville died, she had believed incorrectly, as it turned out that she still had time. She had written the last entry 3 months before her death. It said, "I have asked the healer Senna Holt to keep this record. I believe she will. When it is safe, when there is a way to be certain the record reaches him without being intercepted, this should go to Aldrich Vane, King of Valesthorn. Tell him the boys have his eyes. Tell him I am sorry it took so long to find a way." I sat with that for a while. My wolf lay with its chin on the floor of my chest, very still, the way a wolf lies when it has found the place it was looking for and is not certain yet whether to believe it. I told the steward to clear my afternoon schedule. Then I went back to the ward, where Senna Holt was finishing her rounds, and I said, "I need you to stay for the rest of the week if you are able. There is still fever to treat, and I have some things to attend to that will require the ward to be managed without me." She looked at me. "The folio," she said. "Yes." "Are you all right?" I considered the question. "I will be," I said. "I think I will be." She nodded, the way she nodded when a patient gave her an answer she could work with. "Then go," she said. "I'll have the ward when you get back." I spoke to Orez first. He was sitting up, well enough to be moved to a chair, and he looked at me when I came in alone with the particular wariness of a man who has spent his life in the lower quarters, and has learned that a king appearing alone in a room usually means something uncomfortable. I sat across from him. I told him what I knew. I told him what Marin's record said. I told him that he had a right to receive this information or to refuse it, and that nothing I said here would change his position in this kingdom, or in his own life, unless he chose for it to do so. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "My mother always said I had strange eyes. She said they didn't come from anywhere she could account for." "They didn't," I said. "I'm sorry it took this long to tell you where they came from." He looked at his hands for a moment. "The other 2, he said, "you're telling them as well. If they want to know." "Tell them," Orez said. "If you're telling me, tell them we should." He stopped, looked at me. "We've known each other by sight for 11 years, he said. "I've delivered grain to your keep stores." "You have," I said. "And you never." "I didn't know to look," I said. "Someone asked a question yesterday that I should have asked 22 years ago." Orez was quiet again. Then he said, "Who asked it?" "The healer," I said. "Senna Holt." He nodded slowly. "She's good," he said. "She looked at me proper. Most people look past." "Yes," I said, "she does look proper." Davin took it differently, not badly, but differently, the way a man takes news that reorganizes everything he thought he knew about the ground he was standing on. He was quiet for nearly an hour. He asked careful questions about Marin, about the council member, about whether any danger remained. I told him honestly. Harville had been dead for 14 years. The particular balance of power he had maintained had long since dissolved. The three of them were in no danger that I could see. "What does this make us?" he said at the end. "Whatever you choose," I said. "The record exists. The bloodline is real. If you want acknowledgement, I will give it. If you want to continue as you are, you may do that as well. This is your life, and I have already had 22 years of it without being able to affect it, which means the choices in it have always been yours." Davin thought about this. "Does it change anything?" he said. "For the keep, for the kingdom?" "It changes what I know," I said. "I don't know yet what else it changes. Some of that will depend on what the three of you want." He was quiet a little longer. Then he said, "Talk to Aldrin, he's the youngest. He should hear it from you, not from us." "I will," I said. Aldrin, who was 21 and had come to the keep to work in the records house and had not expected to spend his second month there lying in the fever ward, and then receiving information of this nature from the king, said very little at all. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "She kept a record." "A good one," I said. "She tracked all three of you. Your health, your work, your families. She knew where you were." Aldrin's face went through something complicated and then settled into something steadier. "Can I read it?" he said. "Yes," I said. "When you're well enough." "I want to read it," he said. "I want to know what she wrote." "You will," I said. "I promise." The week finished. The fever broke in the keep the way fevers break, not all at once but in stages, with the last few patients lingering longer than expected, and then, one morning, everyone well enough to be moved to their own quarters. Senna Holt had managed the ward cleanly for 4 days while I was occupied with other things, and she had done it without drama, without requiring guidance, without making the matter into anything other than what it was: sick people who needed tending. On the day the last patient was discharged, I found her in the courtyard with her mule, doing the same thing she had been doing when I first spoke to her about the folio, checking her panniers with the methodical attention of someone who does not trust that things are where they belong unless she has confirmed it herself. "You're leaving," I said. "The fever's done," she said. "I'm not needed here anymore." "The folio," I said. She paused. "Keep it," I said. "You kept it better than I would have. You kept it for 10 years and carried it 30 miles and asked the one question that had to be asked to make any of this possible. The record belongs with you." She looked at me steadily for a moment. "Marin asked me to deliver it to you." "And you have," I said. "The delivery is done. The record can stay where it's been." A pause. My wolf had been watching her all week with the patient, easy attention of a wolf that has decided something and is simply waiting for the moment to become clear. Not urgent, not demanding, simply present the way it had not been present in a very long time. "Do you have a reason to leave?" I asked. "When the fever is done?" She considered the question with the thoroughness she gave all questions. "My next assignment is in Belwick's Ford," she said. "Physician Alder will be recovered by now, and he doesn't need me." "Then you have no particular reason to leave," I said. "That's not a reason to stay." "No," I said. "I know. I'm asking if you have a reason to stay." Senna Holt looked at me. Then she looked at the mule. Then she looked back at me. "Tell me what happened to the three of them," she said. "After, tell me how they took it." So I told her. I told her about Orz's quietness and his question about his eyes. I told her about Davin's careful accounting of danger and his direction to tell Aldrin. I told her about Aldrin, 21 years old in a fever ward, asking to read the record. I told her what Marin had written at the end. Senna Holt listened to all of it without interrupting. When I was done, she was quiet for a while. She was a good woman, she said. Maren. She was sensible and she was kind and she thought about other people before she thought about herself to a degree that was, in my medical opinion, not entirely healthy. But she was a good woman. Yes, I said. She was. She would have been glad to know their well, Senna said. I told her at the end the last entry she was asking about them, whether I had news. I told her Auras had gotten the miller's license extended and Davin had taken on the eastern yard and Aldrin had just been hired at the records house. She was very pleased about Aldrin. She said, "The records house. That's right for him." She always said that. My wolf exhaled. There is no other word for it. It was not a sound. It was not a movement. It was simply the long exhalation of something that has been holding itself carefully for a very long time and has, at last, found that it does not need to hold quite so carefully anymore. "Stay for the week," I said. "The records house will want to speak with you about Aldrin's history. The physician from Belwick's Ford is recovered and won't need you yet. And I paused, which is not something I do often. I would find it useful to have you here a little longer. There are things in the record I don't yet understand and you knew her. You can help me understand them." Senna considered me. "That's a reasonable request," she said. "Yes," I said, "I'm trying to be sensible." She looked at me for another moment. Then she unpacked the mule. She stayed for the week. And then, because Aldrin had questions about the record that were better answered with Senna present, she stayed another. And then because Auras had asked, quietly, if she might come to see the mill before she left. He wanted to show her where he had grown up, where Maren had apparently watched him from a distance on a summer fair day and written an entry about it. She went to the South Ward and came back and stayed again. My wolf did not push. It had learned, in 22 years of patience, not to push. It simply remained attentive in the way that something remains attentive when it is certain of a thing, and prepared to let the thing arrive in its own time. On the evening of the third week, we were sitting in the small room off the ward. It had become, by habit, the place we sat in the evenings, because it had a table and 2 chairs and a good lamp, and no particular function after the supply count was done. Maren's folio was on the table between us. Senna had been telling me about the village of Ashfeld, about what Maren had been like in the last years, the garden she had kept, the particular tone she used when she was being more stubborn than she wanted to admit, the way she had spoken about the keep with a precision that Senna had taken at the time for ordinary memory, and understood only later as the precision of someone who had loved a specific place very carefully from a distance. I was listening, and I was also watching Senna's hands on the folio, the way she handled it with the same care she gave her medical records, as something that deserved to be kept properly. "She described you well," Senna said. "In the entries where she mentioned you, she said, 'He is a sensible man and he does not know it because no one has told him plainly enough.'" "She was right," I said. "No one has." "I've told you twice now," Senna said. "You have," I said. "It's becoming a pattern." She looked at me with that direct attention. "Are you asking me to stay?" she said. "Properly, not for Aldrin's questions or Auras' mill." My wolf had its chin on the floor of my chest and was very still. "Yes," I said, "properly." Senna Holt looked at the folio, then she looked at me. Then she said, "I have been keeping other people's records for 20 years. I don't have a fixed place. I have a mule and a letter of introduction from Belwick's Ford and a habit of going where the fever goes." "Yes," I said. "That's not a settled life," she said. "No," I said. "But it is a life that kept something worth keeping for 10 years and asked the one question that needed asking and told me that I was sensible in a fever ward at 6 in the morning. And I have found in the course of the last 3 weeks that those are not common qualities." A pause. "The wolf," she said, "you haven't mentioned it." "No," I said. "I was trying to be sensible about the order of things." "You can mention it," she said. "It's been patient," I said. "For 22 years it has been patient. which is, it had good reason as it turned out to wait. And I would not ask you to make a decision about a wolf you've only known for 3 weeks, or a king you've known for 3 weeks, or a keep you've spent 3 weeks in. But I would ask, if you have no fixed place and no particular assignment waiting, I would ask if you might stay a while longer and see. Senna Holt was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'll need a proper room, not the healer's alcove. There is a proper room, I said. And I'll need to keep my folio practice. I'm not giving up the record keeping. The records house would have you, I said. Aldrin has already mentioned it. Of course he has, she said. He's a sensible boy. He gets it from somewhere, I said. Senna looked at me for one more moment. Then she set her hand on the folio, not covering it, just resting there, the way she rested her hand on things she had decided to keep properly. All right, she said, a while longer. My wolf exhaled again, long and steady. The room was warm. The lamp was good. Marin's folio sat on the table between us, and Senna Holt's hand was on it. And outside the small room the keep went about its evening business, Davin checking the eastern yard, Auras who had come up from the south ward on the 1st of the month with the grain accounts, Aldrin already 3 weeks into a new position in the records house and managing, by all reports, exactly as well as Marin had believed he would. 3 pairs of stormwater, eyes in a fever ward. One question asked plainly. I had spent 22 years not knowing what I had. I intended to spend the rest of my time being sensible about what I did.